Darth Maul, one of the most iconic characters in cinema history. The guy showed up in one movie, said like 5 words total, got cut in half, and still became a fan favourite for life. That's when you know you've made it. So in this video, we're going to explore the lore of Darth Maul, his story, hidden details, and all the things you might have missed along the way. So sit back, make yourself comfortable, maybe grab something warm to drink, and trust me, this is going to be such an experience. Now, let's begin. When you really think about it, most of the scary guys in Star Wars have a pretty straightforward, almost relatable origin story. Anakin was a slave kid on Tatooine with a ton of raw talent and a fear of losing his mum. Dooku was a respected Jedi who got cynical with the whole system and thought he could do better. Palpatine was a rich kid from a political family who discovered the dark side and went full monster. But Darth Maul? Oh man, Maul's origin story is on a whole other level of messed up. We have to start by talking about Dathomir. Imagine a planet where the sky is a permanent bruised shade of red and purple, like a healing wound. The sun, if you can even see it, is a dull, angry orange smudge. The trees are gnarled, blackened things, like skeletons clawing at that bloody sky. And the history here, it's soaked into the soil. It's primal, like the very rocks are pulsating with something dark, ancient, and powerful. It's a living, breathing entity of darkness, and it's run by a group that makes the Sith look almost corporate. I'm talking about the Nightsisters. Now, this is crucial. You have to forget everything you think you know about the Force from the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi talk about the living Force and the cosmic Force, all about balance and serenity. The Sith are all about passion, power, and a very specific, almost philosophical kind of hatred. The Nightsisters? They're playing a completely different game. This is magic. We're talking potions that can bend your will, rituals that can summon storms, spells that can reanimate the dead into shambling zombies. It's raw, it's wild, it's untamed, and it's incredibly, viscerally powerful. And the Queen, the High Priestess, the absolute boss of this whole terrifying operation, was a woman named Mother Talzin. To just call her a leader is like calling a hurricane a bit of wind. Talzin was Dathomir. Her power was so deeply intertwined with the planet that it was hard to see where she ended and the world began. She could drain the life out of a person with a mere gesture, leaving them a withered husk. She could create doppelgangers, perfect copies of people that were indistinguishable from the real thing. She communed with spirits, commanded legions of undead, and her connection to the dark side was so profound, it was less like using a tool and more like being the source of the river itself. She was, for all intents and purposes, a goddess on her own nightmare world, and into this world, at the very heart of this nexus of dark power, Darth Maul was born. His mother was Talzin herself, and his father was a Night Brother. Now, the Night Brothers are the male counterparts to the Nightsisters. They are these big, hulking, Zabrak warriors who live in separate villages, like the one we see in the Clone Wars led by Old Man Darker. Their society is brutally matriarchal. The Nightsisters are in charge. The brothers are the warriors, hunters, labourers. They're a warrior class, but often treated as little more than property, as breeding stock to produce strong children. It's a society where strength is the only currency, and weakness is culled without a second thought. But Maul was different from the very beginning. He was the son of the Queen. He was born not on Dathomir, but of Dathomir, in the most literal sense. He was drenched in this dark side energy from his first breath. The planet's vile vibe, his mother's immense power. It was in his blood, it was in his bones. He had a connection to the Force that was just naturally aggressive, powerful, and utterly savage. It was a storm looking for a place to unleash itself. He was a raw, uncut diamond of pure dark side potential. And let me tell you, a certain Sith Lord sitting in his fancy office on Coruscant, a guy named Palpatine, felt that potential from light years away. So, this brings us to the million-credit question that fans have debated in forums and chat rooms. Did Talzin give her son to Sidious, or did Sidious straight up steal him? The truth is, it's messy. It's less of a clear-cut kidnapping and more like a shady, back-alley deal between two superpowered crime bosses that went horribly wrong. See, Talzin and Sidious had a history. They weren't strangers. They were associates. Peers, in a way. They recognized the immense, terrifying power in each other. There are heavy hints in the lore, especially from the Clone Wars, that they might have even planned to rule the galaxy together at one point. A real power couple of absolute darkness. Talzin, the mistress of magic, Sidious, the master of the Sith. Can you imagine? So, Talzin, a political operator in her own right, saw a chance to expand her influence beyond her spooky red planet. She thought they'd form an alliance, but instead, Sidious saw potential in her child and took him. Talzin later said, in the Clone Wars, "He took him from me. He took my son. He cut all ties, leaving Talzin with nothing but a bitter sense of betrayal." Now, you're this little kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old. You're ripped from your mother's arms, from the only world you've ever known, a world of shadowy rituals, chanting and primal magic. And you're dumped into a sterile, cold metallic dungeon deep beneath the glittering surface of Coruscant. Your new guardian, your teacher, your master, is the most evil, calculating man in the galaxy. Maul's early life wasn't a childhood. It was a manufacturing process, an assembly line of pain. Sidious subjected him to brutal Sith rituals that were designed to physically and mentally warp him, to burn away any softness, those iconic tattoos we all know and love. In the Legends continuity, they're Sith tattoos, a complex tapestry of dark side incantations and symbols permanently inked into his skin. The process itself was likely agonizing, a ritual of pain that served to further bind him to the dark side. It's Sidious marking his property, a constant physical reminder etched right into his flesh of the power that now owned him. It's like a barcode on a piece of hardware. Your anger, your hate, your rage, that is your only family. That is your only strength. Let it burn everything else away. Let it fuel you. Let it make you strong. He was systematically deconstructing the child that Dathomir had created, a child already molded by a culture of strength and survival, and rebuilding him into something new, something Sidious could control absolutely. Something more than human in its focus and power, and yet something less than human in its capacity for empathy or love. A demon, a hunting dog that knew only the scent of its prey and the voice of its master. A Jedi youngling of the same age is in the peaceful, luminous temple on Coruscant. They're learning to meditate, to feel the living force, to center themselves. They're building lightsabers as a rite of passage. Little Maul, at that same age, was probably being taught how to dismember a Gutkur with his bare hands before he was 10 years old. It's a fundamentally different kind of schooling, and it produces a fundamentally different kind of being. This origin story is the master key to understanding everything about Maul. His single-mindedness, his pure, undiluted rage, his inability to form healthy connections. It's all because that's all he was ever allowed to be. He never had a choice. He never had a chance to be anything else. There was no moment of temptation, no fall from grace. He was born in a pit of darkness and then had the ladder kicked away behind him. And honestly, that's a way more terrifying and profoundly tragic beginning than if he'd just been some random Jedi who got angry and turned to the dark side. So we left off with Maul as this little kid, ripped from his spooky homeworld of Dathomir and thrown into a dungeon on Coruscant. But that's just the starting line. That's just acquiring the raw material. What happens next is the real gut-wrenching horror story. This is where Darth Sidious takes that raw, savage block of stone. We're about to go inside the most exclusive, most terrifying finishing school in the galaxy. The personal tutelage of a Sith Lord. First, let's clear up a long-standing fan debate about where this training happened, because it tells us a lot about Sidious's methods. In the current official canon, the story is pretty straightforward, and frankly, more psychologically terrifying. Maul was trained exclusively by Sidious, in absolute secrecy, deep beneath the Galactic Senate building itself. The heart of the Republic, the shining symbol of democracy, justice and order. And right underneath it, in some hidden, obsidian-lined Sith cavern, a little boy is being systematically tortured and twisted into a monster. But there's this other, older story from the Legends timeline that a lot of fans still love, and it involves a place called the Opress Academy. Now, this is a cool idea, and it's worth exploring because it adds a different, intriguing layer. Opress was this elite, notoriously brutal private military academy. It wasn't a Sith school, it was a place where the galaxy's rich and powerful sent their kids to become the best of the best. Elite bodyguards, mercenary commanders, special forces operatives. The idea was that Sidious enrolled Maul there under a false identity. He'd get a top-tier formal education in everything from blaster marksmanship and demolitions to battlefield tactics and starship engineering, all while hiding in plain sight among other students. It's a compelling what-if. You can just picture a teenage Maul trying to blend in, his tattoos explained away as some weird cultural thing, his simmering rage mistaken for simple intensity. He'd have been a star pupil, dominating in combat exercises, but completely failing at the whole making friends part of the curriculum. Even in that version, it was never a replacement for Sidious's personal touch. It was more like sending your prodigy kid to a fancy high-pressure boarding school for specialised skills. But then he comes home on the holidays and you continue his real education. The core of his Sith training, the part that truly broke and reforged him, always came directly from Sidious. The Academy was just a tool to add a fine edge and a legitimate pedigree to the blade. Sidious was the one who heated, hammered and quenched it in the first place. And oh, the forging process. This is where we leave the theoretical and get into the real, nasty, day-to-day reality. The training was a relentless, multi-front campaign to utterly destroy the child's mind and rebuild it entirely in the Sith's image. It was a three-pronged attack: psychological, physical, and philosophical. It all started with absolute, total isolation. From the moment he was taken, Maul had no friends, toys, comforts, no one else to talk to. His entire world, his entire frame of reference, was Darth Sidious. This is a classic, brutal cult indoctrination technique. When you are the only source of information, the only source of approval, and the only source of even basic sustenance, and also the source of unimaginable pain, you become the absolute center of that person's universe. The prisoner, over time, develops a twisted, desperate bond with the jailer. Maul's longing for a simple nod of approval, for a single, well done, from the only person he had any connection to, became a powerful, driving, addictive force. Sidious engineered a psychological dependency so deep that obedience wasn't born from fear. It became a biological and emotional need. To disobey was to be cast back into the void of absolute loneliness, which was a fate worse than the pain. Then came the physical conditioning, which was really just institutionalized torture dressed up as training. And I'm not talking about a slap on the wrist for getting a math problem wrong. We're talking about being locked in lightless, sound-dampened chambers for weeks with only a single canteen of water, forced to meditate on his hatred to stave off madness. We're talking about being thrown into a pit with a hungry, feral beast like a Nexu or a Gundark. Not with a lightsaber, but with a broken vibroblade or his bare hands. Not to fight it, but to be hunted by it for days until he either won or died. Sidious would use his own force lightning on the boy, not to deliver a killing blow, but as a form of correction, a searing jolt for a poorly executed lightsaber form, a prolonged agonizing surge for showing a moment of hesitation. It wasn't to punish the body, but to sear the lesson directly into the nervous system, associating failure with white-hot agony. He would deprive him of food, water and sleep, pushing his young body to the absolute brink of collapse, all to teach him that his physical needs were irrelevant, a distraction for the weak. The only thing that mattered was the mission. The only fuel he needed was his own burning hatred. He was being taught that his body was not his own. It was a weapon owned by his master. And underpinning all of this was the constant, relentless philosophical mantra. It was a drumbeat in Maul's head, every waking hour, whispered during meditations, screamed during combat. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. He was manufacturing a psychopath. He needed Maul to be able to walk into a room and kill a man, a woman, a child, without a flicker of hesitation, without a single thought beyond the tactical objective. He needed him to be empty of everything but purpose. But Sidious was also the ultimate pragmatist. A rabid, undisciplined dog is useful for terror, but a highly trained, intelligent, and disciplined rabid dog is unstoppable. So alongside the brutal indoctrination and torture, there was an intense, grueling, and incredibly comprehensive academic and practical education. Maul wasn't only strong, he was forced to become brilliant. He was drilled in stellar cartography and astrophysics, so he could navigate hyperspace routes without an astromech. He became an expert in demolitions, poisons, and stealth technology. He studied political history and manipulation so he could understand the systems he was meant to undermine. He learned to be a warrior, a spy, a pilot, and an assassin, all rolled into one. He became a master of Terraskasi, the esoteric martial art specifically designed to combat Force users, making him deadly even without a weapon. And his lightsaber training, that was a thing of brutal beauty. Sidious drilled him in all 7 classic forms of lightsaber combat. He was a master blender, a virtuoso of violence. His primary style was Juyo, the most aggressive and unpredictable form, often described as controlled fury. It was a perfect outlet for his inner rage. He also utilized elements of Varpad, the variant created by Mace Windu, which walks a razor's edge, channeling the user's inner darkness and the opponent's aggression into a whirlwind of attack. But he could also switch in an instant to the raw, overpowering defense and counterattacks of Gemso, or the precise, elegant, and deadly strokes of Makashi, ideal for lightsaber-to-lightsaber duels. This immense versatility is a huge part of what made him so lethally effective. Fighting Maul wasn't like fighting a duelist with a known style. It was like trying to fight a hurricane that could suddenly turn into a scalpel. And this wasn't all theoretical. Sidious didn't wait until Maul was a grown man to test him in the field. Oh no, his final exams were real, live, high-stakes assassination missions. While most kids his age were maybe sneaking out to see a pod race or struggling with algebra, a teenage Maul was being sent to some far-flung world to silently eliminate a corrupt politician who was threatening Sidious's plans, or to wipe out a rival crime lord who was stepping on the wrong interests. These missions were the final, crucial piece of the psychological conditioning. Each successful kill was a step further down the dark path, a tangible result for all the hatred he'd been taught to cultivate. Each life he took was another thread of his own humanity permanently severed. He was learning that his power, his pain, his entire existence had a very direct, very final purpose: to erase whatever his master pointed him at. Through all of this, the profound isolation, the constant torture, the relentless training, the early soul-scarring kills, Sidious was shaping something very specific. He wasn't trying to create a true successor in the spirit of the Sith rule of 2. He never saw Maul as an equal who would one day surpass him. He was creating a living embodiment of rage and obedience. Maul was the proof of concept for his power. Think about his Sith name, Darth Maul. A maul is a heavy, crude two-handed hammer or axe. It's a primitive, brutal tool designed for one thing: to smash and to break. It's not elegant, it's not finessed. Sidious didn't name him Darth Strategos or Darth Invictus. He named him after a blunt instrument. That single word tells you everything you need to know about his intended, permanent role in the grand plan. He was the hidden blade, the ghost in the machine. While Senator Palpatine played the kindly, concerned public servant upstairs, his personal nightmare was growing in the darkness directly below, being honed into a perfect, living weapon. A weapon of pure, undiluted rage, wrapped in a shell of absolute, conditioned obedience. For years, that's all he was. He wasn't a person, he was a function. And for Sidious's plans, for a long time, that was all he ever needed to be. Alright, so let's talk about Maul's real power. Now we have to look past the movies. The movies gave us the icon, but the animated shows, the comics, that's where we find the substance of this guy. That's where we see what he's truly made of. So, the big question. How strong was Darth Maul really? And I'm not just talking about his ability to flip around like an acrobat on too much caffeine. I mean, where does he stand when you line him up against the heavyweights? We're talking about the Premier League of Force users, and we need to figure out if Maul was a title contender or just a guy who looked good on the poster. His first big showcase, of course, is his duel with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi on Naboo. Now, Qui-Gon Jinn was no pushover. He was a Jedi Master, a member of the Council in everything but name, a veteran of countless conflicts. He was strong, centered, and used the solid defensive Form 4, Ataru. This was a form that relied on agility and powerful, decisive strikes. And Maul? He handles him. In that initial fight on Tatooine, he's toying with Qui-Gon, backing him down effortlessly. It's a predator assessing its prey. Then on Naboo, in the Theed generator complex, he takes on both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, who was a gifted Padawan but not yet a knight. He dominates. He defeated a Jedi Master in single combat. Yes, he got caught off guard by a young Obi-Wan's surge of emotion and was bisected, but the point stands. In a straight, one-on-one fight, peak Maul from Episode 1 was capable of killing a Council-level Jedi. That alone puts him in an elite tier. That's Maul 1.0. Now, This is where most people's knowledge ends. They think, he killed Qui-Gon, got cut in half, the end. But oh my friend, that was only the beginning of his story. His survival is the first testament to his insane willpower. We're talking about a Zabrak, a species known for their pain tolerance and sheer stubbornness, hopped up on pure, unfiltered hatred. When we meet him again in the Clone Wars, he's different. He's older, wiser, more unhinged, but also more complete. He's no longer Sidious's weapon. He has his own ambitions, and his skills, they've evolved. He's not a duelist anymore, he's a force of nature. But let's get to the juicy stuff, the fights. Because at the end of the day, in Star Wars, you're often measured by the colour of your saber and who you can beat with it. In the Clone Wars, he has a legendary duel with his brother, Savage Opress, against Darth Sidious. We're going to get to that part later. But anyway, this fight is maybe the most important benchmark for Maul's power. Sidious is the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years. He makes planets tremble. He's been pulling the strings of the entire galaxy from the shadows. And Maul and Savage, two incredibly powerful dark side warriors, team up against him, and yeah, Sidious wrecks them. It's a master teaching his disobedient dogs a final, lethal lesson. This fight tells us a crucial truth. Maul, even at his peak post-return, was nowhere near Sidious's level. But who is? The real question is, did he ever have the potential to surpass him? I think the answer is a fascinating maybe. Sidious saw Maul as a tool, not a successor. He never intended to pass on the rule of two to him. He was always planning to replace him with Tyrannus, Count Dooku, and Dooku was a different beast. A former Jedi Master, a political idealist turned cynic, he had the finesse, the elegance, the political connections that Maul lacked. Dooku's Form 2, Makashi, was the duelist's form, designed for lightsaber to lightsaber combat. It was like classical fencing, all precision and economy of motion. So, how would a fight between Maul and Dooku go? This is a fan's dream match. We never got it in canon, but we can speculate based on their styles and showings. It's the ultimate clash of philosophies made manifest in combat. Dooku is a precision instrument. He's calm, controlled, and devastatingly accurate. He defeated Obi-Wan multiple times with almost casual ease, and Obi-Wan was a master of Soresu, the most defensive form. Anakin only beat him by overpowering him with raw brute strength and throwing Form 2's need for precision right out the window. Maul is the opposite of that control. He's pure, agile, relentless aggression. He's a storm. He wouldn't try to outfence Dooku. He would try to overwhelm his defenses through sheer speed and fury to break his elegant posture with raw brute force chaos. It would be a classic, unstoppable force versus immovable object scenario. My take? It would be incredibly close. In his prime, during the Clone Wars, I'd give a slight edge to Dooku. His mastery of Form 2 is specifically designed to counter the aggressive, acrobatic styles like Maul's. He would try to let Maul exhaust himself, find an opening in his relentless assault, and finish him with a precise strike. Dooku's control of the Force was also more refined. His Force lightning and telekinesis were far superior to what we ever saw from Maul. He could potentially use the Force to disrupt Maul's acrobatics, to unbalance him, and create that opening. But, and this is a big but, if Maul got him in a corner, if he pushed past Dooku's initial defense and got inside his guard, Dooku would be in serious trouble. Maul's ferocity in close quarters is a nightmare. Dooku was a duelist, but Maul was a brawler with the skills of a master. In a prolonged, messy engagement, Maul's animalistic instincts might just trump Dooku's classical training. Now, let's compare him to the Jedi legends. We already saw him beat Qui-Gon. What about Mace Windu? Windu is a nightmare matchup for any dark side user. His Varpad form is a channel, a loop that reflects an opponent's darkness back at them. It's a feedback loop of fury. The more you hate, the more you tap into the dark side, the stronger Mace becomes. Against Maul, a being of pure, focused hatred, Maul would come at him with everything he had, all that rage and pain, and Windu would only feed on it, turning Maul's greatest weapon against him. Mace Windu would have a field day. I think Windu takes that fight decisively. He's one of the few people who could probably match Maul's aggression and then surpass it with his unique connection to the dark side's energy. Yoda? No contest, Yoda is on another plane of existence. His connection to the Force is so profound that martial prowess almost becomes irrelevant. Maul's lightsaber wouldn't touch him. Yoda would be flipping around. He'd be a green blur, using the Force to redirect Maul's attacks, to disarm him, to end the fight without ever needing to land a killing blow. A fight with Yoda wouldn't be a duel, it would be a demonstration. But if we really want to measure Maul's power, to see where he truly stands, we have to compare him to someone like Anakin Skywalker. Both were forged by the dark side in different ways. Maul was molded from birth, raised in pain and hatred until there was nothing left but purpose. Anakin was consumed by it later, driven by loss, fear, and obsession. The difference is, Maul's darkness was pure discipline. Anakin's was chaos. In a straight fight, Anakin, especially at his peak during the Clone Wars, would likely overpower Maul. His raw force potential was off the charts, and he fought with the same ferocity, but with far more strength behind it. Maul's agility, his mastery of the double blade, would make it a brutal and fast-paced duel. Still, Maul's control and precision might let him hold his own for a time. He wasn't a wild berserker. In that way, Maul was what Sidious wanted Anakin to be, obedient, precise, and entirely defined by rage. Anakin, however, had free will, and that made him far more dangerous. Now, yeah, it's Anakin again, but this time as Darth Vader. Vader is what happens when Maul's hatred and Dooku's precision merge into one being. He had the discipline Maul lacked, and the raw power Dooku never touched. But where Maul's rage burned outward, Vader's burned inward. Maul sought revenge against his master. Vader sought forgiveness from his past. Both were broken by the same hand, both used as weapons, and both defined by failure. But in raw strength, Vader was on another level. He was the perfected Sith enforcer, unstoppable, unrelenting, and completely enslaved by his own pain. Now don't get me wrong, Maul is a beast. Look at his campaign on Mandalore, which again I had planned that for later. He takes over the entire planet's criminal underworld, becomes the ruler of a warrior culture, and builds his own syndicate. This is a strategist, a manipulator. He outsmarts Jedi. He plays crime lords against each other. He becomes a king. This is a different kind of power. It's the power of intellect and charisma, twisted by the dark side. It shows that his potential was always greater than what Sidious allowed him to be. He was a general, a politician, a crime boss, a multi-talented nightmare. But here's the most telling comparison, the one that truly defines Maul's later strength: Obi-Wan Kenobi. Their rivalry is the spine of Maul's entire story. He starts by killing Obi-Wan's master. He ends, decades later, being killed by Obi-Wan in a duel that lasts about 3 seconds on Tatooine. In between, they fight multiple times, and their dynamic is a perfect mirror of their growth. In their first rematch in the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan is a fully fledged Jedi Master, a general in the war, and a master of Form 3, Soresu, the ultimate defensive form. This form was literally designed to protect, to outlast an opponent. It's the form of the immovable object, and Maul loses. He loses that fight. His aggression, which worked so well against Qui-Gon's Form 4, is completely neutered by Obi-Wan's impenetrable defense. He only escapes because of outside help. This is a huge moment. It shows that the Jedi, specifically Obi-Wan, have adapted to him. They've studied him. They've found his counter. So, where does this leave us? What is the true strength of Darth Maul? It's not that he was the most powerful Force user. He wasn't. Sidious, Yoda, Windu, even Anakin, at his peak, they all outclassed him in raw, measurable power. His strength was something else. It was his indomitable will. It was his ability to survive anything. Dismemberment, exile, insanity, the loss of everything he built. He was a cockroach that survived a nuclear blast, fueled by pure spite. He was a brilliant martial artist, one of the best pure duelists the Sith ever produced. He could hold his own against almost anyone in a straight fight, but his true power, his unique signature, was his resilience. He was the physical embodiment of the dark side's promise. That hatred can keep you alive long past your expiration date. He was a lesson in what happens when you take a potentially great man and you strip him of everything except his pain, and he still refuses to die. He was a masterpiece of wasted potential. Could he have surpassed Sidious? In a different galaxy, maybe. If Sidious had trained him as a true successor, teaching him the deeper secrets of the Sith instead of just using him as a blade, that potential was absolutely there. The raw material was exceptional. The will, the aggression, the combat genius, it was all there. But Sidious never wanted an equal. He wanted a servant. And in the end, that was the one barrier Maul could never overcome. His strength was immense, but it was always, ultimately, contained by the will of a greater darkness. Alright, let's talk about the moment that should have been the end. The clean, sizzling cut. It was one of the most definitive, visually final defeats you could possibly imagine. The galaxy, quite understandably, moved on. The Sith got a new apprentice. The Jedi Order filed a report and assumed the mysterious Sith threat was extinguished. But he wasn't. The story of how Darth Maul survived being cut in half is not only a cool piece of trivia, it is, perhaps, the single most powerful and visceral testament to the raw, unnatural, and terrifying power of the dark side of the Force that we have ever been shown. This is a story about the human, or in this case Zabrak spirit, fueled by pure, white-hot hatred, being forced to keep a shattered body functioning long after every biological process should have given up the ghost. To really understand this, we need to pause right at that moment of impact. He is bisected. The lower half of his body is gone. The spinal cord is severed. The shock to the nervous system alone would have triggered instant catastrophic shutdown. The blood loss from such a wound would have drained his body of life in a matter of seconds, a minute at most. By all rights, he should have been dead before he even hit the bottom of that shaft, but he wasn't. The how is the dark side in its most concentrated, primal form. We hear the line all the time, almost as a joke. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. Well, my friend, this is that phrase made flesh, or rather, made not to become dead flesh. Maul's physical body was utterly destroyed, but his spirit, his consciousness, his undiluted will, was so profoundly steeped in the dark side that it flat out refused to let go. Think of his hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi in that moment. It was a cosmic, all-consuming inferno. His rage at his own failure, his humiliation, the shattering of his pride as the perfect Sith weapon. These emotions became a perverse, self-sustaining life support system. It was a feedback loop of agony and spite. The pain fed the hatred, and the hatred, in turn, fueled the dark side energy that literally staunched the bleeding, that kept the heart beating, that forced the lungs to draw breath. He used the Force, not to heal. The dark side cannot truly create or heal, but to sustain, to cling, to anchor his crumbling physical form to the world of the living through brutal force of will. It's a dark, twisted perversion of a Jedi healing trance, where a Jedi uses serenity and harmony with the living Force to mend the body. A dark side user uses their own agony as a battery to force the body to simply not die. So, he fell. But we have to assume he didn't land in the main reactor core, which would have vaporized him instantly. He must have crashed onto some kind of service ledge, a maintenance conduit, or a pile of wreckage deep within the palace's industrial underbelly. And there, in the cold, oily darkness, the true soul-shattering horror began. The initial survival was a miracle of dark side power, but what followed was a descent into a hell far worse than a quick death. The perfect Sith instrument, the pride of Darth Sidious, the master of the saber staff, is now a broken, mutilated, crawling thing. His mind, which had been so disciplined, so sharply focused, so meticulously controlled by decades of Sith conditioning, simply could not process this new, horrifying existence. The trauma was so absolute, so world-ending, that his psyche did the only thing it could to protect itself. It shattered. It broke into a million pieces and retreated into the deepest, most primal corners of his consciousness. The Sith Lord Darth Maul was effectively gone. In his place was a creature, an animal. He forgot his name. He forgot the Sith code. He forgot his master. He forgot the feel of a lightsaber in his hand. Language, strategy, pride, all of it was scoured away, leaving only the basest, most instinctual core of his being. A constant screaming feedback loop of pain, a gnawing hunger, and a burning, directionless, all-encompassing rage. This creature, using its claws and a terrifying spider-like agility, born of desperation, somehow managed to claw its way out of the bowels of Theed. It's a journey we can scarcely imagine, a journey of months, perhaps even years, through ventilation shafts, garbage chutes, and service tunnels. It eventually stowed away on a garbage freighter, a literal piece of refuse among the refuse, and was dumped on a remote, nightmarish junkyard world called Lotho Minor. Lotho Minor is a special kind of hell. It's a planet used as a galactic garbage dump. The surface is an endless, toxic metallic landscape of decaying refuse and scrap constantly shifting, collapsing and burning. The air is thick with the smell of rot and chemical fires. It is a place where civilized society sends its waste to be forgotten, and it was the perfect, horrifying reflection of Maul's own shattered state of mind. He became the phantom king of this trash heap. He built a lair deep in the tunnels of scrap, a nest lined with the gnawed bones of the giant, verminous insects and scavengers he learned to catch and eat raw. He was a local legend, a myth among the few desperate, outcast beings who eked out an existence there, a demon that lived in the trash, a thing of claws and nightmares. For nearly a decade, this is what he was, a thing, a feral, broken thing of pure unthinking instinct, his once proud horns now just part of a bestial crown. This is where his brother enters the story. Years later, Mother Talzin, seething with a desire for vengeance against Darth Sidious for his betrayal, enacted her own plan. She empowered one of the Night Brothers, a massive and powerful warrior named Savage Opress, and sent him on a quest. She couldn't give him coordinates. The connection was too faint, too corrupted by madness. Instead, she gave him a vision, a feeling, a pull through the Force. She told him to find his brother. Savage, this hulking, powerful, but relatively simple warrior, travelled from world to world, following this faint, flickering echo in the dark side. It was a desperate, hopeless-seeming mission. He finally ended up on the hellscape of Lotho Minor, and after being attacked by a shrieking, multi-limbed monstrosity, he fought it off and realised the horrifying truth. This chittering, slavering, monstrous thing, with insect-like, mechanical legs it had cobbled together from scrap metal to replace its own, was the legendary brother he had been sent to find. The moment of recognition is one of the most powerful and chilling scenes in the entire Clone Wars series. Savage pins the feral creature down, screaming at him, "Brother, I am your brother." He struggles with this insane, powerful being, and in a last, desperate attempt, he holds up the Sith holocron that Talzin had given him. And something clicks. A single memory, buried under a decade of layered insanity, fires like a spark in the darkness. Maul's eyes, which had been wide, yellow, and utterly wild, suddenly snap into focus. The animalistic rage is still there, but it's now channeled through a lens of recognition. He sees the face of his brother, and he said one word, a name that had been the center of his universe before it became the source of his annihilation: Kenobi. That single name was the key that began to unlock the prison of his own mind. It was the one constant, the one focal point of such immense emotional power that it could bridge the gap between the disciplined Sith Lord and the feral beast. His hatred for Kenobi was the first, foundational piece of his old identity to reassemble itself. It was a dark and twisted foundation, but it was a start. Savage, with a mixture of horror and determination, took his broken brother from the junkyard and brought him back to their homeworld, Dathomir, to Mother Talzin. And there, in the heart of the Nighsister's coven, Talzin performed a ritual of dark magic. It was a supernatural purification. The green misty magic of the Nightsisters scoured his mind. It burned away the filth, the decay, and the tangled knots of insanity, forcibly reassembling his shattered psyche, restoring his memories, his intellect, his Sith training. It was a violent magical rebirth. She then used her sorcery to graft a set of sophisticated, terrifying, cybernetic legs to his body. Legs that were themselves a product of dark side alchemy, turning him from a crawling wretch back into a towering, formidable, and physically complete figure. But let's be absolutely clear. He was not the same man who fell down that shaft on Naboo. How could he be? The experience of being used, broken, discarded, and then crawling through a decade of feral madness, only to be reborn through his mother's magic, fundamentally and irrevocably changed him. The most profound change was in his relationship with Darth Sidious. The old Maul was defined by obedience. His entire identity was that of a weapon waiting in the armory for his master's command. The new Maul? He had been that weapon. He had been used to the point of destruction, and when he broke, his master didn't even bother to check the pieces. Sidious assumed he was dead and replaced him with a political alternative, Count Dooku, without a second thought. That feeling of being a discarded, broken tool shattered his blind, conditioned loyalty forever. His hatred was no longer a resource for his master to wield. It was now his own. It was personal. It was directed at Kenobi, yes, but it was also now aimed squarely at Sidious. The rebirth on Dathomir created a new, independent, and wildly unpredictable dark side power in the galaxy. He was no longer Darth Maul, apprentice of Sidious. He was just Maul, a dark side warlord operating outside the Sith hierarchy. His rage was now his to command, his to direct, and that made him more dangerous, more cunning, and in a very real sense, more powerful than he had ever been before. So Maul is back. He's been pulled from the garbage heap of both Lotho Minor and his own mind, rebuilt by dark magic and given a new set of legs. What's strutting out of the shadows of Dathomir now is something new. A rogue Sith, a free agent, boiling with a hatred that belongs entirely to him. But he's also smart enough to know he can't take on the galaxy alone. He needs an army, he needs power, and first he needs a right-hand man, and fate, or rather his vengeful mother, has handed him one on a silver platter, his brother, Savage Opress. Now, you have to understand Savage. He's not like Maul. He wasn't sculpted from childhood by a Sith Lord. He was just a Night Brother, a big, strong, relatively simple warrior from Dathomir. He was powerful, sure, but his power was raw, unrefined. Mother Talzin pumped him full of dark side magic to make him a tool for Ventress, and that process twisted him, made him more aggressive, more brutal. But he wasn't a strategist, he was a blunt instrument. When he found Maul, he found a purpose. He saw his brother not only as family, but as a leader, a master who could give him direction. For Savage, this was about loyalty, about blood. For Maul, it was something else entirely. The moment his mind cleared, he saw Savage as a brother, yes, but mostly as a resource, as an apprentice. This is the first real glimpse we get of Maul's new independent ambition. He's immediately falling into the only pattern he knows, the Sith Master-Apprentice dynamic. He may have renounced Sidious, but the model of power is burned into his brain. So, he sets about shaping Savage, moulding him into a proper dark side warrior. He takes this hulking, powerful, but clumsy fighter and begins to teach him. He refines his lightsaber technique, moving him away from wild, angry swings and towards more controlled, precise, and brutal strikes. He teaches him the ways of the dark side, how to channel his rage, how to use pain as a focus. It's a twisted reflection of his own training under Sidious, but with one key difference. There's a genuine, if deeply dysfunctional, bond here. Maul isn't torturing a tool into obedience. He's teaching his brother. He feels a sense of ownership, of pride even, in Savage's progress. He calls him my apprentice, and you get the sense that, for Maul, in his own broken way, this is an expression of care. This is his family. This is his dynasty. And together, they are a terrifying force. They start their rise not in the political spheres, but in the one place where power is raw and up for grabs. The galaxy's underworld. They become boogeymen. They march into the lairs of pirate lords and gangsters and demand fealty. They don't negotiate. They issue ultimatums, backed up by the very real threat of being chopped to pieces by a dual-bladed and a single-bladed red lightsaber. They amass a small, ruthless fleet and an army of thugs and cutthroats. They're building a power base from the ground up, creating a kingdom of fear in the lawless spaces of the galaxy. This is where we see Maul's strategic mind truly blossoming outside of Sidious's shadow. He understands that to be a power in the galaxy, you need more than just the ability to win a duel. You need ships, you need soldiers, you need resources, and he's good at it. For a while, the Brotherhood of Blood is unstoppable. They are the new terrifying kids on the block, and the entire criminal underworld is forced to take notice. But cracks begin to form almost immediately, and they're not only strategic, they're deeply emotional. The core of their bond, this brotherhood, is built on a foundation of sand. Savage's motivation is pure and simple: loyalty to his brother. He follows Maul with a dog-like devotion. He believes in their shared destiny, their blood right to power. Maul's motivation, however, is a tangled mess of new ambition and old festering wounds. His primary driving force isn't building a kingdom with his brother, it's revenge. This obsession is a cancer in their partnership. It clouds Maul's judgment, it leads them on wild goose chases, and it repeatedly puts them in direct, unnecessary conflict with the Jedi Order and, by extension, the entire Republic. You can see the frustration building in Savage. He's the practical one. He wants to consolidate their power, to rule the underworld they're conquering. But again and again, Maul's single-minded hatred for Kenobi pulls them off course. It's like they're building a house, and every time the walls get a little higher, Maul gets a vision of Kenobi and says, "Forget the house. We have to go burn down his shed." It's strategically insane, and Savage, who isn't burdened by this history, can see that. The emotional breakdown is a slow burn. Savage, for all his brutality, has a clearer, more honest view of their situation. He is the one who often urges caution. He is the one who questions Maul's more reckless plans driven by vengeance. He starts to see that his brother's obsession is a weakness, a flaw in the perfect Sith Lord he looks up to. The bond of blood is being strained by the reality of Maul's psychological damage. The strategic breakdown, however, is swift and catastrophic. Their rise was too loud. They weren't hiding in the shadows like proper Sith. They were building a public empire of fear, and this inevitably draws the attention of the one person they could never, ever afford to fight, Darth Sidious. Sidious doesn't see them as rivals. He sees them as impudent children playing with toys they don't understand. He sees Maul, his discarded weapon, not only functioning, but trying to start his own franchise, and he will not tolerate it. The arrival of Sidious is the moment the fantasy of their brotherhood shatters against the rocks of true, uncompromising Sith power. So, picture the galaxy. The Clone Wars are in full swing, right? It's this massive, sprawling conflict that's on every HoloNet news channel. You've got the noble Jedi generals leading the brave clone troopers against the endless waves of separatist battle droids. It's a clean, simple story for the public to follow. Good versus evil. But anyone with half a brain and who's actually living in the galaxy knows that's all a facade. The real story, the one that determines the price of your morning caf, the safety of your shipping lane, the very air you breathe in the lower levels of Coruscant, that story is written in the shadows. And in those shadows, a ghost is at work. Darth Maul, the guy everyone, including his former master, thought was dead. He realized that the Sith and the Jedi, they're playing for control of the government. They want the throne. But Maul, he understands that the throne is just a piece of furniture. Real power is in controlling the world underneath the world, the foundation that the throne sits on. The Sith control the Republic. The Separatists, they have their own droid armies. We will amass power of our own, far from the prying eyes of the Jedi or the Sith. That's the birth of the vision. That's the Shadow Collective. The name is so perfectly Maul. It's not an empire. That's too egotistical, too obvious. It's a collective, a shadow. It implies a coming together of disparate parts to form something greater, something that exists just outside the light, influencing everything it touches. His plan was breathtakingly simple in its ambition. Unite all the major criminal factions under one banner, one army, one intelligence network, one economy. He wasn't just going to be a crime lord, he was going to be the crime emperor. His first target was Black Sun. Now, to understand why this was such a baller move, you have to understand what Black Sun was. Black Sun was a millennia-old criminal syndicate with tendrils in every major system. They were the classic mobsters: extortion, slavery, weapons smuggling, assassination. They were so powerful, they were basically a neutral third party in the war. Everyone used their services. They were led by a council, a group of Vigos, who all thought they were untouchable in their fortified citadel on Mustafar. Maul and Opress stroll into the heart of the enemy's power like they're picking up takeout. The Vigos are all sitting there, probably arguing about profit margins, and in walks the stuff of their worst nightmares. Maul gives them a chance, one chance. He offers them the opportunity to join him willingly. They laugh, they pull blasters, and in the space of about 30 seconds, Maul and Savage turn that council chamber into a charnel house. It's a demonstration of raw, overwhelming power. But Maul doesn't kill everyone. He leaves one Vigo alive, a Faline named Zeton Moj. He's trembling, probably soiling his expensive robes. Maul points a lightsaber at him and essentially says, "You saw what happened to the old management. You are the new leadership of Black Sun, and you report to me." It's a masterstroke. He doesn't need to personally manage every aspect of Black Sun. He just needs one terrified, compliant figurehead to be his puppet. Instantly, he gains control of their entire operation. They're enforcers, they're smugglers, they're spies. He gets a ready-made army of thugs and killers without having to recruit a single one. Okay, step 1 check. He's got the muscle, but muscle needs to be paid and an empire needs capital. So, his next target is the Pike Syndicate. Now, the Pikes are a different beast altogether. They're not frontline fighters. They're the bankers, the logistics experts. They control the galaxy's spice trade from their sterile, fortified moon of Obadiah. Spice is the universal constant of the underworld. It's currency, it's a weapon, it's a commodity. If Black Sun is the fist, the Pikes are the wallet. Maul's approach with them is different. He can't just walk in and decapitate their leadership. For one, the Pike leader is a lot more cautious, and their security is built around long-range defense and anonymity. But more importantly, Maul understands their psychology. The Pikes aren't motivated by honor or combat, like Black Sun thugs might pretend to be. They're motivated by cold, hard profit. Fear is a good motivator, but greed is a better one. So he sets up a meeting. He presents his case, not as a threat, but as a business merger. He shows the Pike leader the blueprint of the Shadow Collective. He explains that with Black Sun as the enforcement arm, the Pikes' spice shipments would have guaranteed protection. Rival syndicates would be crushed or absorbed. Their shipping lanes would be secure from pirate raids and even Republic privateers. He's offering them a monopoly. He's talking about increasing their market share and profit margins to levels they'd never dreamed of. He's appealing to their core nature, and it works. The Pikes, seeing the ruthless efficiency with which Maul operates, agree to join. Now, Maul has the product, the supply chain, and the economic engine. His empire now has a bloodstream, but he's still missing something crucial, a legitimate standing army. Not only criminals and smugglers, but a highly trained, fanatical, culturally unified military force. And that's where his most brilliant and most audacious move comes in. He sets his sights on Mandalore. Now, Mandalore is a mess. It's in the throes of a cold civil war. You have Duchess Satine Kryze and her pacifist new Mandalorians in power. They've turned Mandalore into a neutral, demilitarized state. And then you have the traditionalists, the Death Watch, led by Pre Vizsla. These guys are the true believers. They want to return Mandalore to its warrior roots, to the days of conquering worlds and wearing Beskar armor. They're incredibly powerful, but they're losing the political war. They're stuck in the shadows, launching guerrilla attacks, unable to topple Satine's government. Maul sees this fractured situation, and he sees an opportunity. He goes to Pre Vizsla and offers him the one thing he can't get on his own: total victory. He lays out a plan so diabolical, so cunning that it's a work of art. He tells Vizsla, "Join the Shadow Collective. My resources, combined with your warriors, will make us unstoppable. I will give you Mandalore." Vizsla, of course, is arrogant. He's a Mandalorian through and through, and he looks at Maul as a useful tool, a powerful ally, but ultimately someone he can control and discard once he's got his throne. This is his fatal mistake. He fundamentally underestimates Maul's ambition. So, the campaign for Mandalore begins. And this is where we see Maul's strategic mind operating at its peak. He doesn't send Death Watch in to attack. That would be too crude, and it would just make Satine a martyr. No, he orchestrates a campaign of psychological and economic warfare that would make any real-world general take notes. First, he uses Black Sun and the Pikes. He has them flood the streets of Sundari, the Mandalorian capital, with chaos. There are spice dens opening up, gang wars breaking out, protection rackets terrorizing businesses. The goal is to make Satine's government look weak, incompetent, and unable to provide basic security and law and order. The citizens start to get scared. They start to lose faith. Then comes the masterstroke. Maul stages a false flag operation. He figures out that the Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi, who has a complicated history with Satine, is on the planet. And they stage a brutal public attack on a civilian sector. It's a horrific spectacle, and it's broadcast everywhere. The public's fear instantly turns to outrage. They turn against Satine, who is known to be sympathetic to the Jedi and the Republic. They see her as the one who let these outsiders come in and attack her own people. The political ground beneath her feet completely evaporates. It's the perfect storm. The people are begging for order, and Death Watch, presenting themselves as the true protectors of Mandalore, are right there to provide it. The coup is almost effortless. Death Watch marches into the capital, facing minimal resistance from a population that now sees them as liberators. They capture Satine, and Pre Vizsla sits down on the throne. And this is where the trap that Maul has been setting from the very beginning finally springs shut. Vizsla, now feeling powerful and secure, looks at Maul and Savage and essentially tells them, "Thanks for the help, fellas. You can leave now. We'll call you if we need you." He thinks he's the one in charge. He thinks the muscle he hired is getting too ambitious. Maul doesn't even flinch. He simply says, "I challenge you. Single combat for the right to rule. This is the Mandalorian way, the ancient tradition." Vizsla, trapped by the very culture he championed, has to accept. The duel that follows is one of the most symbolic in all of Star Wars. On one side, you have Pre Vizsla. He is the embodiment of Mandalorian tradition. He's clad head to toe in Beskar armor, the strongest metal in the galaxy. He's got the Darksaber, the ancient symbol of Mandalorian leadership that dates back to Taro Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi. He's got a jetpack, wrist flamethrowers, whistling birds, the whole arsenal. He represents technology, heritage, and martial pride. On the other side is Maul. He has a lightsaber and the Force. That's it. He represents something entirely alien to Mandalorian culture, the raw, unadulterated power of the dark side. The fight isn't even close. Maul is toying with him. He uses his speed and agility to dodge every blast, every missile. He's systematically dismantling not just Vizsla, but the entire idea that Mandalorian weaponry can stand against the Force. It's a brutal, humiliating lesson. Vizsla fights with all his skill and all his gear, and it's just not enough. Maul finally disarms him, takes the Darksaber in his own hand, and with one clean final stroke, he beheads Pre Vizsla. The Death Watch warriors are stunned. Maul ignites the Darksaber, holds it high, and declares himself the new Mandalore, the true leader. And because he won by their own rules, in their own most sacred tradition, they have no choice but to kneel. In that moment, Maul achieves the impossible. He, a Zabrak from Dathomir, becomes the ruler of the most warrior-centric culture in the galaxy. So, in a staggeringly short period of time, Darth Maul has the enforcement arm, Black Sun, the economic engine, the Pike Syndicate, the legitimate fanatical army, Death Watch and the Mandalorian people, and he holds the ultimate symbol of power, the Darksaber. The Shadow Collective is now a reality. It's a fully functional, multifaceted empire that exists in the blind spot of the two major galactic powers. It has its own military, its own economy, its own intelligence network. It can disrupt supply lines, fund rebellions, topple governments, and do it all without ever declaring a formal war. For a brief, shining moment, Maul is no longer an apprentice, no longer a weapon. He is a king. He has built something entirely his own, something that proves he was always capable of so much more than Sidious ever allowed him to be. This is the peak of Maul's power. It's also the moment he makes himself the single biggest threat to Darth Sidious. Because while the Jedi are distracted by the war, Sidious has been keeping an eye on everything, and the one thing he cannot tolerate is a rival Sith power base. Maul didn't just escape death, he built a throne for himself right under Sidious's nose. And that, my friend, is an act of defiance that simply cannot be allowed to stand. The Shadow Maul cast had just grown too long, and the true Lord of the Sith was about to step out and remind everyone who controlled the very light that cast the shadows. Now, what about Satine, the Duchess of Mandalore, the one person who managed to bring peace to a world built on war? She was everything Maul wasn't. Calm where he was chaos, compassion where he was rage. But that made her the perfect target. After defeating Pre Vizsla in single combat, the planet fell under his rule almost overnight. Death Watch, once proud Mandalorians, now served a Sith. The city of Sundari turned from a place of order into a throne room of terror. And sitting at the center of it all was Maul, waiting for the Jedi he hated most. He knew Obi-Wan would come. He knew that despite the Jedi Code, despite the politics, despite the war, Obi-Wan still cared about Satine. And that's exactly why he kept her alive. When Obi-Wan finally arrived, disguised as a Mandalorian guard, Maul welcomed him like an old friend. Every word, every movement was designed to hurt. Maul had spent years in the shadows, dreaming of this moment. the chance to make Obi-Wan suffer the way he had suffered on Naboo. And then, in one of the most brutal and personal moments in the Clone Wars, Maul drove the darksaber straight through Satine's chest. As she fell into Obi-Wan's arms, Maul whispered that he would make him share his pain. But even in that moment, Maul didn't win. Obi-Wan didn't give him the satisfaction of hate. He held Satine as she died, calm and heartbroken, and Maul, for all his power, all his vengeance, was left standing there, furious that the one thing he wanted most, to break Obi-Wan, still escaped him. That's the tragedy of Maul. No matter how many battles he won, no matter how many thrones he claimed, revenge was the one victory forever out of reach. So, Maul is sitting pretty. He's got Black Sun's muscle, the Pike Syndicate's money, and now, thanks to that brutal duel with Pre Vizsla, he's got the loyalty, or at least the terrified obedience, of Death Watch. He's standing in the throne room on Mandalore, the darksaber in his hand, and that right there was Maul's first and biggest problem: legitimacy. See, winning the darksaber in combat is one thing. It's the oldest law they have. He who wins the blade in fair combat has the right to rule. But that law was written for Mandalorians, by Mandalorians. It was never meant for a Sith Lord to walk in and use their own mystical magic to take it. So from day one, his rule was built on a foundation that was already starting to crack. He had the right to rule according to their most sacred text, but he didn't have the legitimacy in their hearts. So how do you rule a planet of the galaxy's most stubborn and proud warriors when you're an outsider? You can't just force them, you'd have to kill them all. Maul's genius and his darkness was in how he approached this. He didn't try to become one of them. He didn't put on Beskar armor and try to learn the songs. No, he did something far more clever and insidious. He used their own culture, their own weaknesses, against them. He ruled through a puppet. After he killed Pre Vizsla, the most obvious successor was a woman named Bo-Katan Kryze. She was a member of the legendary clan Kryze, and sister to the very Duchess Satine they had just overthrown. She had the bloodline, the respect, the combat experience. She was the natural choice. He could kill her. It would be easy, but he's smart enough to know that if he cuts down the most respected female warrior in the room, the sister of the former Duchess, he'll ignite a civil war within his own new army before he's even had a chance to sit on the throne. He needs to consolidate power, not shatter it, so he does something brilliantly cunning. He doesn't confront her directly. Instead, he looks past her. His eyes scan the room and land on another warrior, Gar Saxon. Now, Gar Saxon is the prototype of an opportunist. He's ambitious, he's ruthless, and he recognizes which way the wind is blowing. He's not burdened by Bo-Katan's rigid idealism. Maul points to him and essentially says, You understand power. You will be my fist on Mandalore. You are my new viceroy. This move is a masterclass in political manipulation. By elevating Gar Saxon, a true Mandalorian, to a position of immense power, Maul does several things at once. First, he creates a native figurehead. It makes his alien rule more palatable to the masses. It says, I'm not here to replace you, I'm here to lead you, and I will reward your most loyal sons. Second, he instantly creates a class of collaborators. Every Mandalorian who wanted power and prestige now saw a clear path: loyalty to Maul and Gar Saxon. He turned their ambition into his weapon. And third, he completely sidestepped Bo-Katan. He made her rebellion look like the action of a sore loser, someone standing in the way of Mandalore's new, powerful future. Bo-Katan, of course, wants no part of this. She and her loyal followers, who become the Night Owls, openly rebel. They refuse to bow to a false Mandalore. And this is where we see the true nature of Maul's rule. He goes straight to what he knows: overwhelming, terrifying force. He uses the full machinery of his Shadow Collective. This is the key. His rule of Mandalore wasn't a Mandalorian affair. It was the first true integration of his criminal empire with a legitimate state. He used the Pike Syndicate to control the flow of information and goods. Suddenly, communicating with off-world allies became difficult for Bo-Katan's faction. Supplies started to dry up. He used Black Sun as his enforcers, patrolling the streets of Sundari alongside his loyalist Mandalorians, who are now proudly calling themselves the Super Commandos under Gar Saxon. He turned the capital into a police state. Checkpoints, identity scans, random searches. Dissent wasn't just crushed, it was made inconvenient, dangerous and hopeless. He ruled through a combination of ancient symbolism and modern terror. He had the Darksaber, so the traditionalists had to at least acknowledge his legal right to be there, and he had a brutal, omnipresent security apparatus that made sure no one could effectively challenge that right. It was a terrifyingly efficient system. His entire understanding of power is based on the rule of two: a master who has absolute power, and an apprentice who covets it. He couldn't help but rule Mandalore like a Sith Lord. He created a top-down, fear-based dictatorship. He demanded obedience, and for a culture built on honor and personal strength, that only works for so long. The Bo-Katan rebellion was proof. The second his grip loosened, people would break away, and his grip was about to be loosened in the most dramatic way possible. His former master, Darth Sidious, decided to pay a house call. Sidious couldn't have a rival Sith power base, especially one sitting on top of the Mandalorian military-industrial complex. So he arrives, and he doesn't bring an army, because he knows this isn't a war against Mandalore. This is a Sith affair. He's there to reclaim his property. The duel between Maul, Savage, and Sidious is legendary, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it later, but the aftermath for Mandalore is what matters here. Sidious defeats them. He kills Savage and captures Maul, and just like that, the head of the snake is cut off. But Maul's legacy on Mandalore was permanent. He shattered the planet's fragile peace forever. He proved that their ancient traditions could be hijacked by a sufficiently cunning outsider. He dragged them back into a galaxy-wide conflict, and in doing so, made them a prime target for the Empire. And what about the Darksaber? Its story was far from over. After Maul was captured, the saber was lost for a time. Maul eventually recovered it, and it became a symbol of his own personal empire, his enduring will, long after he lost Mandalore. He kept it during his years in exile, a reminder of the throne he once held. Later, the saber would pass to Sabine Wren, then to Bo-Katan, and then to Moff Gideon. Its legacy, this symbol of Mandalorian identity, was forever intertwined with a period of foreign occupation under a Sith Lord. Maul's use of it set a precedent. It showed that for Mandalorians, it was a symbol that could be taken by anyone strong enough to win it. This directly led to future conflicts, like when Moff Gideon used its possession to claim authority, perverting its meaning even further. So, Maul's rule of Mandalore was a paradox. It was both his greatest achievement and the ultimate proof of his limitations. He was smart enough to conquer a planet using its own laws, but he wasn't wise enough to truly lead its people. He saw a culture and only understood how to break it to his will, not how to nurture it. He became the Mandalore, but he never for a single second understood what it truly meant to be Mandalorian. And in the end, that was why his kingdom, like his lightsaber, was a weapon that was destined to be turned against someone else. So, let's get back to Sidious. Maul is at the absolute peak of his power. He's built his own Sith empire, running parallel to the one his former master is secretly constructing. It's the ultimate act of teenage rebellion, if your teenager is a half-cybernetic Sith Lord with a double-bladed lightsaber. For Sidious, it was a personal insult. It was a challenge to his authority. The way he finds them is pure psychological warfare. Maul and Savage are on Mandalore, in the throne room, trying to deal with Bo-Katan's rebellion. Suddenly, their comms go dead. An unnatural cold settles over the room, and they feel it simultaneously. A presence in the Force so vast, so dark, so suffocating, that it can only be one person. It's like the ocean itself has decided to pay you a visit, and it's angry. He announces his arrival with a wave of pure dread. He wants them to know he's coming. He wants them to be afraid. In the throne room, Darth Sidious, the senator from Naboo, in his simple dark robes, looking like a kindly old man who took a wrong turn. But his face is a mask of cold, calculated fury. The first thing he says is dripping with condescending venom. He looks at Maul and says, "You have become a rival." Not a threat, a rival. In that one word, he's acknowledging Maul's achievement, only to immediately dismiss it as an impertinence. What follows is one of the most lopsided duels in Star Wars history, and it's packed with symbolism from start to finish. First, the combatants. On one side, you have Maul and Savage, brute force, rage. Savage is all raw, untamed power, swinging his saber with wild, heavy blows. Maul is more refined. Together they are a whirlwind of offense, And on the other side, you have Sidious, one old man. He doesn't even use his lightsaber at first, he just evades them. He's a phantom. He flows between their attacks, his movements so fluid and unnatural, it's like he's not even solid. He's toying with them. He's demonstrating that their years of training, their physical prowess, their fancy sabers, are utterly meaningless against true mastery of the dark side. When he finally does draw his lightsabers, and yes, he uses two, because he's decided the lesson is over, and it's time for the punishment to begin. The way he fights is a mockery of their style. He's faster, more precise, and infinitely more cruel. And he starts with Savage. Why? Because Savage represents Maul's new power base. He's the symbol of the brotherhood Maul built to replace Sidious. So Sidious systematically dismantles him. He parries Savage's powerful blows with effortless flicks of his wrist. He taunts him. "You have been poorly trained," he sneers, a direct insult to Maul's abilities as a master. And then, with a brutal, contemptuous thrust, he kills Savage. He impales him, and Savage dies in Maul's arms, a lump of extinguished potential. This is the core of the Sith rule of two. The apprentice is meant to surpass the master. But Sidious perverted that rule. In his view, the apprentice was a tool to be used and discarded. By killing Savage, he was destroying Maul's legacy. He was proving that anything Maul could create, he could destroy. Now it's one-on-one, master and former apprentice, and the dynamic shifts completely. With Savage dead, Maul's rage reaches a fever pitch, but it's a desperate, hopeless rage. He fights with everything he has, but it's like a child throwing a tantrum against a parent. Sidious doesn't even look concerned. He disarms Maul with humiliating ease, using the Force to yank the darksaber from his grip. Sidious is re-establishing the natural order, as he sees it. He is the master. Maul is the disobedient dog that needs to be beaten back into submission. The lightning is a cleansing fire, a punishment for his arrogance. He doesn't even grant Maul the dignity of a warrior's death. He captures him. For Sidious, killing Maul would have been an admission that Maul was a worthy opponent. By taking him alive, he's saying, "You are not a rival. You are a prisoner, a specimen. You are beneath a warrior's death." He locks Maul away in a spire on Stygian Prime, to use him as bait, as a forgotten relic of a failed rebellion. So, what does this duel ultimately reveal? First, it reveals the absolute hierarchy of the Sith under Sidious. There is only Sidious. Everyone else, Maul, Dooku, Ventress, even Vader later, are all disposable tools in his toolbox. He encourages their rivalries because it keeps them weak and dependent on him. The moment one of them steps out of line and builds their own power, he personally crushes them. It's the ultimate expression of his paranoia and his need for total control. Second, it shows the vast, almost unimaginable gulf in power. We see Maul as this incredibly powerful warrior, and he is. But Sidious exists on a completely different plane. His power isn't in his lightsaber skills, it's in his total mastery of the Force. He treats Maul's best efforts as a minor inconvenience. It's a chilling reminder of what the true Dark Lord is capable of when he's not pretending to be a politician. We've built up this guy, Darth Maul, but an artist needs a brush, a composer needs an instrument, and a living weapon of pure rage. He needs a signature. He needs something that doesn't just say, "I am dangerous," but screams it into the void. And my friend, he found it. We have to talk about the double-bladed lightsaber in the hangar bay on Theed. Maul is just standing there, a statue of menace. He ignites one red blade, maybe little scary, standard Sith stuff. And then a second blade erupts from the other end. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, two seasoned Jedi Knights, take a subconscious step back, and the audience's collective jaw hit the floor. This was a fundamental shift in the language of Star Wars combat. It was a declaration. It was the Sith equivalent of throwing down a gauntlet, a challenge, and a middle finger all at once. But where in the galaxy did this thing come from? It feels so perfectly, uniquely Maul, but the idea is ancient, buried in the darkest chapters of Sith history. To understand the saber staff, you have to go on an archaeological dig into the lore. We're talking thousands of years before Palpatine, before Vader, back to the days of the old Sith empires, when legions of Sith Lords roamed the galaxy. The double-bladed lightsaber, or a saber staff, as it's often called in the archives, has its roots right there, in that era of unchecked darkness and outright war. It was never a common weapon. It was a specialist's tool, a weapon of intimidation, favored by Sith who wanted to project pure, overwhelming, and terrifying power. Think about it from a psychological perspective. A Jedi's single blade is a weapon of defense, of elegance, of peacekeeping. It's a duelist's tool, a symbol of their role as guardians. It's a scalpel. But a double blade? It says, I am not here to negotiate. I'm not here to duel. I'm here to overwhelm you. I'm here to dismantle you. I am here to create a sphere of absolute destruction around myself. It turns the lightsaber from a sword into something more like a staff, a whirlwind, a threshing machine made of pure energy. It was historically a weapon made for fighting multiple opponents, for controlling space, for creating a zone where nothing could survive. It was the weapon of a berserker, a battlefield dominator, and that ancient, brutal legacy fit the modern weapon that was Darth Maul like a custom-made glove. But the critical thing so many people get wrong, and it's a detail that makes Maul so much more interesting. Sidious didn't hand this thing to him. Number. Maul built it himself, and the process of building a lightsaber, for any Force user, is one of the most deeply personal, almost sacred acts they will ever undertake. It's a rite of passage. It's a reflection of who they are. Already covered this topic in my previous videos. But anyway, a young Padawan travels to the crystal caves of Ilum. They sit in silence, and they listen. They don't choose a crystal, instead the crystal calls to them. It's a symbiotic relationship. They then meditate, focusing their peace, their serenity, their commitment to the Force into the crystal, attuning it to their presence. The crystal becomes a partner in their journey. The resulting lightsaber is an extension of their will to protect and serve. For a Sith, the entire process is an act of violence. It's a dark mirror of the Jedi way. A Sith can't just use a natural kyber crystal. The crystal is inherently attuned to the light side and rejects the dark side's corruption. So what does a Sith do? They have to take one. They acquire a kyber crystal, almost always by killing a Jedi and stealing the crystal from their lightsaber. They take this object of peace and light, and then they perform a brutal, painful ritual called bleeding. They pour all their hatred, their anger, their pain, their every negative emotion into the crystal. They dominate it, they torture it, they force its resonant frequency to shift through sheer agonizing willpower until the crystal can't take it anymore. It literally screams in the Force, fracturing internally, and bleeds, turning from its pure blue or green hue into that fiery, corrupted, angry crimson red. The crystal, it's a prisoner, screaming with the same rage and pain as its master. It's a horrifying process. Now take that already horrific concept and double it. That's what Maul did. The construction of his double-bladed lightsaber was an act of double murder, a double enslavement. He would have had to acquire 2 kyber crystals, most likely from Jedi he was personally sent to assassinate as part of his training, and then he would have had to bleed them both, one after the other, forging their tormented souls into the twin hearts of his weapon. Just imagine the focus, the concentrated malice that required. Then comes the physical engineering, which is no small feat either. We're not just talking about a longer tube. A standard lightsaber hilt contains a complex array of components. A power cell, a focusing lens, a cycling field energizer, a stabilizing ring. A double-bladed lightsaber requires all of that, but doubled and housed within a single, elongated hilt that is heavily reinforced to withstand the immense stress and gyroscopic forces. It needs a second emitter, a complex power coupling system, to channel energy to both ends, and it has to be perfectly balanced. A flaw in the construction wouldn't only mean it doesn't work, it could mean a catastrophic explosion in your hands. The fact that Maul could not only envision this but actually engineer and build it is a huge testament to his comprehensive training. He was a brilliant technician. So, after all that effort, what does it actually do in a fight? Well, the advantages are massive and terrifying, but the limitations are just as severe. It's the definition of a high-risk, high-reward weapon. It's like driving a Formula 1 car, incredibly powerful in the right hands, but it will punish the slightest mistake with utter disaster. Let's go through the pros first. The most immediate and obvious advantage is pure, unadulterated intimidation. We saw it with our own eyes. It's a psychological shock weapon. Before a single blow is exchanged, it puts your opponent on the back foot. It creates doubt. It screams, "You are not prepared for this." Secondly, it's a whirlwind of offense. The spinning, continuous fluid motion can create an unstoppable, relentless barrage of strikes, overwhelming a single opponent's defense. It's like trying to use a single umbrella to block a hurricane. The offensive pressure is constant and exhausting to defend against. Third, it's phenomenally effective for fighting multiple opponents. Maul could keep one blade actively defending his flank or parrying one attacker, while the other blade was simultaneously on the offensive against another. Or he could spin the entire staff, creating a temporary, impenetrable defensive shield around his entire body, a literal wall of plasma. Furthermore, the long hilt offers incredible leverage for powerful, blunt force strikes, using the hilt itself as a club, and it can be used in clever ways to trap an opponent's single blade between the two hilts, locking their weapon in place for a crucial second, setting them up for a disarming move or a devastating kick. But for all its glory, the downsides are a laundry list of how to get yourself killed. First and foremost, it is a weapon that demands immense, almost superhuman, physical strength and dexterity. We're not just talking about muscle. We're talking about understanding physics. If you don't have perfect instinctual control, you won't be guiding the blade. The blade will be guiding you, and it will guide you right into amputating your own leg. It's notoriously clumsy and impractical in tight, confined spaces. You're not doing any of that fancy spinning in a narrow starship corridor or a small control room. Then there's the most famous weakness, the center of the hilt. Because all the danger is focused on the two ends, the middle of the staff is a vulnerable, dead zone. A precise, well-timed strike aimed directly at the hilt itself, which is exactly what a young Obi-Wan Kenobi managed to pull off at the end of their duel on Naboo, can cleave the weapon in two, leaving you with two, less effective half-sabers. Finally, the wide, theatrical, acrobatic fighting style it encourages can leave a user overextended and open to a precise, focused, and economical counterattack from a master of a defensive form like Form 3, Soresu, which is all about minimal, efficient movement and enduring until an opponent makes a mistake. But for Maul, the advantages weren't advantages. They were a perfect mirror of his soul. He was a physical powerhouse, an acrobat, a creature of pure aggression and theatrical intimidation. The limitations, the need for perfect control, the vulnerability of the hilt, were things he trained relentlessly to overcome with his sheer speed, ferocity, and unpredictable agility. And that brings us to the final and perhaps most important piece of this puzzle, the symbolism. That weapon became him. Before he ever spoke a single snarling word in the films, his lightsaber did all the talking for him. It was a perfect walking fighting metaphor for his entire existence. It was a weapon of pure offense, just as he was a being of pure attack. It was unorthodox, unexpected, and terrifying, just like the Sith's return to the galaxy was supposed to be. It was a symbol of his dual nature, the savage, primal fury from the Knights of Dathomir, and the refined, meticulously crafted weapon of the Sith Order. It was his pride, his masterpiece, his identity. Now, Maul is imprisoned. Let's really put ourselves in that cell for a minute. This is the culmination of every single failure he's ever had, all crashing down on him at once. He's back in chains, but this time it's different. Sidious made a point. He demonstrated, in the most brutal way possible, that Maul was never, ever going to be his equal. And the killing of Savage, that was the masterstroke. Sidious was cutting out the weak parts of his creation, and Savage was the biggest weak spot. He made Maul watch because he wanted to burn the lesson into his brain. Attachment is a flaw. Love is a vulnerability. And I am the only power that matters in your life. He starts having visions, but that's too clean a word for it. They're not like dreams. They're violent, intrusive insights. It's like his mind is being forcibly plugged into the mainframe of Sidious's plan. He gets flashes of a great machine, a gears within gears monstrosity, and he sees that the two sides fighting the war, the Republic and the Separatists, are just two different sets of cogs in the same machine. They look like they're opposing each other, but they're both being turned by the same central engine. He starts to piece it together. The endless resources poured into the war, the way it grinds down Jedi, wearing them out, turning them into soldiers instead of peacekeepers, the way it makes the public scared, tired, and willing to trade freedom for security. He sees the pattern because it's a Sith pattern. It's the rule of two in action on a galactic scale. The Master creates an apprentice, the Separatists, uses them to gain power. And then, well, the apprentice is always meant to be replaced. But who is the new apprentice? That's the missing piece. And then he sees him. It's more of a feeling, a searing, brilliant light in the Force that's being slowly, methodically smothered by a creeping shadow. He feels this person's anger, his fear of loss, his immense power. He doesn't know the name Anakin Skywalker yet, but he knows this is the linchpin. This is the chosen one he'd heard whispers about in Sith lore, and Sidious has him. He's moulding him, twisting him, and when he's ready, he's going to use him to flip the switch on the entire galaxy. The horror of this realization is what truly breaks Maul out of his despair. It's no longer about his own pain, it's the terrifying genius of his master's plan. He understands that if this succeeds, Sidious wins forever. There will be no rivaling him, no building a better empire. The Sith will achieve total, absolute dominion, and Darth Maul will be nothing more than a forgotten, dusty relic in the basement of the new Emperor. His very existence will have been meaningless. That is a fate worse than death for him. So his hatred refocuses. It becomes colder, sharper, more precise. It's no longer a wild blaze, it's a scalpel. He needs to escape. He needs to gum up the gears of this perfect machine. Now, how does he actually get out? The specifics are lost to history, but we can make some educated guesses. His first priority, T's intelligence. He needs to know how much time he has. He needs to confirm his visions. So he does what any of us would do. He finds the galactic equivalent of a seedy internet cafe and starts pulling up news reports. And everything he sees confirms his worst fears. The war is raging, the Republic is more militarized than ever, and at the center of it all is Chancellor Palpatine, amassing more and more emergency powers. The machine is humming along perfectly. He also learns the name, Anakin Skywalker, the hero with no fear, the Jedi's golden boy. And Maul, with his Sith-perfected cynicism, just laughs. It's so obvious. Of course, the perfect candidate is the one standing right in the middle of the Jedi Temple, the ultimate hidden-in-plain-sight move. It's brilliant, and it makes him hate Sidious even more. This is when he shifts to Phase 2, building a weapon. Not a lightsaber, but an army. He needs a force that exists outside the binary of the war. He needs the Shadow Collective, version 2.0, so he goes back to the underworld. And here's the thing about Maul. He's a known quantity now. He's not some mysterious Sith Lord. He's the guy who built a criminal empire once, got his butt kicked by his dad, and vanished. He finds the Pikes, the Black Sun remnants, and he doesn't ask. He demonstrates. His most crucial reunion is with Death Watch. Taking Mandalore isn't the end goal. It's the means to an end. He needs a stage, a planet that matters, a fortress from which he can announce to the galaxy that there's a third option. But more importantly, he's baiting a hook. He knows that a crisis on Mandalore will draw Jedi attention again. Specifically, he's counting on it drawing the attention of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And where Obi-Wan goes, Anakin often follows. This is the core of his new strategy. He's trying to hijack the Sith ritual of apprenticeship. He wants to present himself as the better option. He wants to confront Anakin and say, "Look at what my master has done to me. Look at how he uses people and throws them away. I can offer you a better deal. Together, we can kill him and rule as true equals." It's a sales pitch, a deeply cynical, self-serving and probably doomed sales pitch, but it's the only play he has. But the universe and Sidious's plan has its own timing. Obi-Wan is tied up elsewhere, and the Jedi Council, in their infinite wisdom, sends the one person Maul didn't fully account for, Ahsoka Tano, the former Jedi, the outsider. In a way, she's perfect. She's not bogged down by the Council's dogma. She might actually listen. He wanted Skywalker to come personally. He even tells Ahsoka, "I was hoping for Kenobi." Why are you here? Because Maul's entire plan was built around capturing Anakin. Anything to stop Sidious's chosen one from fulfilling his destiny. Their confrontation in the Mandalore throne room is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Maul, he's trying to recruit her. He lays his entire cards on the table. The Republic is under the control of a Dark Lord of the Sith. He tells her everything is a lie. He's practically begging her to see the truth, because she's his last best hope of getting a message to someone who can actually do something. When she refuses, when she insists her loyalties have changed, he gets frustrated. He's not angry that she's fighting him. He's angry that she's still blind. The duel that follows is a physical manifestation of this argument. It's him trying to literally beat the truth into her. And then, at the climax, when he's captured, he makes one last desperate attempt. You're all going to burn. We're all going to die. He's horrified. He's a prisoner on a ship hurtling towards a cliff, and he's the only one who can see it. And then, the proof arrives. The clones turn, the transmission comes through. In that moment, as Ahsoka looks at him, the look on Maul's face isn't, "I told you so." It's resignation. It's the look of a prophet who was ignored. And now the apocalypse is here. His escape in the ensuing chaos is almost an afterthought. He's won his freedom, but he's lost the war. The machine has completed its cycle. The Empire is born. And Darth Maul, the one who saw it all coming, is once again alone in the dark, a ghost haunting the ruins of a galaxy he tried and failed to save from itself. So, the galaxy has just been put through a meat grinder. The Clone Wars are over. The Jedi are all but extinct, and Palpatine is sitting on a throne, the new emperor of, well, everything. And where does that leave our guy Maul? In a really, really bad mood. Think about his position at the end of the Clone Wars. He's lost everything. Again, his brother Savage is dead, murdered right in front of him by Sidious. His Shadow Collective, that criminal empire he built from the ground up, shattered. His rule over Mandalore, gone. A fleeting moment of power that evaporated like smoke. He's been beaten, humiliated, and thrown aside by his former master. He's public enemy number one for both the new empire and what's left of the criminal underworld. The entire galaxy just got a lot smaller and a lot more dangerous for Darth Maul. So what do you do when you're the most wanted Sith Lord, who isn't actually a Sith anymore, and the whole universe wants you dead? You disappear. These lost years between the end of the Clone Wars and when we find him in Star Wars Rebels are a dark, quiet, and brutally strategic period for Maul. He's playing the long game now, the game of survival. His first and most immediate goal is to get off the grid, completely. He knows Sidious has spies and inquisitors everywhere, so he goes to the one place in the galaxy that's designed for people who don't want to be found, the underbelly of the underworld. We're talking about the forgotten sectors, the ruined worlds, the scum and villainy spots that are so nasty, even the Hutt cartel thinks twice before going there. He starts by reforging his old connections, but carefully, quietly. He can't just walk into a Pike Syndicate board meeting and demand his old job back. They'd sell him out to the Empire for a half-eaten ration bar. So, he works through proxies, through whispers. He uses what's left of his reputation as a bogeyman. The legend of the Sith with the double-bladed lightsaber is a powerful tool. Fear is a currency he understands better than anyone. He begins to slowly, piece by piece, reassemble a network. Not an empire, not yet. An information network. A web of spies and informants scattered across the outer rim. He needs to know everything. Where the Imperial patrols are, which crime lords are on the rise, where the Empire is weak. He's like a spider, spinning a very delicate, almost invisible web in the darkest corner of the room. And all the while, there's one thought burning in his mind, a single, obsessive goal that gives him purpose. It's not revenge against Sidious, not directly. He knows that's a suicide mission. No, his obsession is, and always will be, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi is the ghost that haunts him, the man who took everything from him. In Maul's twisted psyche, Kenobi is the key. He believes that if he can just understand why Kenobi has been the constant thorn in his side, if he can finally defeat him, then everything will make sense. It's the only puzzle he cares about solving. Now let's talk about Crimson Dawn. Think about his track record. The Shadow Collective was loud. It was a sledgehammer. He united gangs like the Pikes and Black Sun by walking in and demanding their loyalty. It was effective, but it made him a target. He learned his lesson. The moment you become a king, everyone sees you on the throne and wants to take a shot. So this time, he's not going to be the king. He's going to be the ghost in the throne room. So, he founds Crimson Dawn, and the genius of it is in the name itself. Crimson for the blood, the rage, his signature color. But dawn, that's the twist. It's about something beginning, a new day, his day. But a dawn is also quiet. It creeps up on you. You don't see it coming until the light is already there. That's exactly how he built it. He wasn't building an army, he was building a sunrise that would slowly illuminate a galaxy he controlled. Now, he can't be the public face. The galaxy thinks he's dead. The Empire would crush him the second he popped his head up. So, he does what any good CEO does. He finds a front man. Enter Dryden Voss. We meet this guy in Solo. Smooth, charismatic, vicious, loves his art and his murder knives. He's the public head of Crimson Dawn. He's the one sitting in the fancy, glass-walled office on Savareen, making deals, throwing parties, being the face of the operation. And he's good at it. He's got the charm to make a deal and the cruelty to enforce it. He thinks he's the boss. He thinks all the power, all the influence, it all flows from him. But he's not. He's a puppet. A very well-dressed, very dangerous puppet, but a puppet nonetheless. And Maul is the one holding the strings, watching from the shadows on Moraband, communicating through a flickering hologram that makes him look like a terrifying red and black demon emerging from the static. It's a brilliant setup. All the power, none of the exposure. Dryden gets to live the high life, but every decision, every major move is run by the silent partner in the Sith tomb. Maul gets to focus on his real goals, his power in the Force, his visions, his hunt for Kenobi, while his corporation, his machine, prints money and influence for him. But even a puppet needs a handler. Maul can't micromanage everything from his ancient temple. He needs an enforcer, a lieutenant he can trust. Someone with ambition, with talent, with that killer instinct. And that's where Qi'ra comes in. Now, Qi'ra's story is a wild one. A street rat from Corellia who clawed her way up from the absolute bottom. She was property of a gang. She's smart, she's adaptable, and she's a survivor in the most brutal sense of the word. She knows how to read a room, how to play a long con, and when to stick a knife in someone's back, literally and figuratively. When Maul first notices her, she's Dryden Voss's top lieutenant, and Maul sees something in her. He sees a reflection. He sees himself in her. Not the Sith part, but the part that was taken as a child from Dathomir, shaped by a brutal world, and forced to become a weapon to survive. He was forged by Sidious. She was forged by the streets of Corellia. But the result was similar. A person of immense will, intelligence, and ruthlessness, who understood that power isn't given, it's taken. And this is the tragic beauty of Maul's plan. He's creating a legacy. He knows he can't take on the Empire alone. He knows his all-consuming obsession with Kenobi might very well be the death of him. It's a quest he can't abandon, a ghost he has to confront. So he's building something that can survive without him. He's making Qi'ra his successor. In a twisted way, it's the most selfless thing he's ever done. He's ensuring that his vision, his organization, his revenge on the galaxy that cast him out will continue long after he's gone. Under his guidance, Crimson Dawn becomes something far more dangerous and resilient than the Shadow Collective ever was. The Shadow Collective was a coalition of gangs. It was always fragile because everyone, the Pikes, Black Sun, Death Watch, had their own agenda and their own power bases. It was an alliance of convenience, and it shattered the moment a bigger threat appeared. Crimson Dawn, by contrast, is a single unified corporation of crime. It's sleek, it's efficient, and it's utterly loyal to him, and later to Qi'ra. It doesn't just control parts of the spice trade or gambling, it infiltrates everything. Politics, finance, the military-industrial complex, they have tentacles everywhere. They aren't moving spice, they're influencing senators on Coruscant with blackmail. They aren't hijacking shipments, they're owning the companies that make the shipments. They became a silent partner in the very economy of the Empire. This is how you build a lasting power. You don't fight the system from the outside, you burrow into it like a parasite and feed on it from within. By the time we get to the era of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, Crimson Dawn, it's a parallel power structure to the Empire. They have their own agents, their own intelligence network that rivals Imperial intelligence, their own military assets. They are, for all intents and purposes, a hidden empire within the Empire. And all of it was orchestrated by a man the galaxy thought was a forgotten relic. And it's all because Maul learned from his mistakes. He traded raw, explosive power for subtle, entrenched influence. He traded being a king for being the power behind the throne, and then the power behind that throne. He went from being a spectacular firework that everyone saw explode to being the fuse connected to a bomb that no one knew was there. The real kicker, the ultimate testament to his success. He succeeded where so many Sith fail. He secured a legacy. His creation lives on. Qi'ra takes the reins of Crimson Dawn, and according to the comics and other stories, she uses it to wage a secret war against the Empire. She becomes a major player who directly challenges Palpatine himself, forming a cabal of other crime lords and disaffected Imperials in a plot called the War of the Bounty Hunters. She becomes everything Maul trained her to be, a shadow ruler, a master of the game. Let's talk about the end of the road for Darth Maul. We've seen him as a weapon, a king, a ghost, and a mastermind. But in Star Wars Rebels, we see him in his most raw and vulnerable state, as a pilgrim, a seeker on a desperate galactic-scale quest for the one thing that has always eluded him. Not just revenge, but answers. To understand Maul in Rebels, you have to appreciate the state of his mind. He's not the confident crime lord of Crimson Dawn anymore. That was a suit he wore. Underneath, the wiring is frayed. He's been running on the same fuel for decades. Pure, undiluted hatred, focused like a laser on Obi-Wan Kenobi. But after everything, that hatred has mutated. It's become a spiritual quest. His first appearance in Rebels is a masterpiece of manipulation. He's subtle, calculated. He intercepts the Ghost crew, and his focus immediately locks onto Ezra Bridger. And here's the first fascinating layer. He sees a powerful, emotionally raw young man being taught by a Jedi Master, and it's a direct echo of his own childhood, of Anakin's, of the entire toxic cycle of master and apprentice. So, he plays the role of the wise, alternative mentor. He's charming, in a terrifying, serpentine way. He speaks to Ezra's frustrations. He says things like, "The Jedi use the Force as a crutch, a set of rules to be followed. I can set you free from such limitations." He's not screaming about the dark side. He's offering freedom. He's offering power to a kid who feels powerless. This is a far more dangerous Maul than the one who just growled, "At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi." This Maul understands psychology. He's a predator that knows how to mimic the calls of its prey. His gift of the Sith holocron is the perfect seduction. It's not a weapon, but it's a key. It's a promise of forbidden knowledge. He's essentially telling Ezra, "Your teacher is keeping secrets from you. I will give you the answers." And he's right about the first part. The Jedi do keep secrets. They are cautious. Maul offers immediacy. He preys on that adolescent desire for quick, definitive answers to complicated problems. This all builds to his grand, insane plan, using an ancient device on the planet Malachor, powered by a Sith holocron, to create a shockwave through the Force, specifically designed to locate one single being. Let's just sit with the absurd, glorious scale of that for a second. It's the equivalent of using a nuclear reactor to power a single light bulb in a lost room. The energy, the focus, the sheer will required is astronomical. It tells you everything about Maul's obsession. He's trying to perform dark side magic to find his ghost. And for one breathtaking moment, it works. When Maul and Ezra merge the Jedi and Sith holocrons, their minds are flooded with visions, fragments of truth and destiny crashing together. In that torrent of power, Maul sees it, twin suns, a barren desert world where his great enemy waits. The vision is so vivid it feels real, like he's already standing there. He whispers, trembling, "He's here," and for the first time in years, he believes he's found the end of his long blood-soaked road. But then, nothing. The vision fades, the connection collapses. Kenobi, somewhere across the stars, feels the violent tug of Maul's hatred and simply lets go. He stops resisting, and the line goes dead. The look on Maul's face in that moment is one of the most haunting in the saga. It's not rage, it's despair. He's been outmaneuvered not by strength, but by serenity. Kenobi defeats him with peace, and Maul is left adrift again, his hope turning cold and hollow. But it's his interaction with Ahsoka that is pure lightning in a bottle. From the moment they see each other, there's a recognition. They are mirror images. Both were apprentices to Sith Lords. Both were cast aside. Both survived and forged their own identities outside the orthodoxies of Jedi and Sith. They are perhaps the only two people in the galaxy who can truly understand the specific trauma the other has endured. Their temporary alliance against the Inquisitors is one of the most thrilling and tense sequences in the series. They fight together with a terrifying instinctual synergy. They move as one, a whirlwind of red and white blades dismantling their common enemies with brutal efficiency. It's a dance of death between two masters who speak the same bloody language, but the entire time you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's no trust, only a shared, momentary goal. So, he goes to Tatooine. Like a monk walking to a holy site, he's stripped of everything but his purpose. The final confrontation is so quiet it's deafening, the vast empty desert under the setting suns. He finds this old man leading a pack animal and says with genuine pity, "Look what has become of you." He sees the great warrior he fought on Naboo, and he sees a broken hermit, and he feels sorrow for him. In that moment, the hatred is almost secondary to a shared sense of loss. When he ignites his lightsaber, it's a pathetic, spitting, unstable thing. It's a manifestation of his own fractured spirit, barely held together, sparking with pain and rage. Maul's mind, for all its cunning, is trapped in that moment in Theed. But Kenobi has spent decades in meditation, mastering peace. He has evolved. He parries the blow and delivers the fatal strike. And then, in Kenobi's arms, the yellow eyes fade. The tension leaves Maul's face. The hatred that kept him alive in a trash pit, that fueled his every move for 30 years, simply evaporates. He looks up at his oldest enemy, the architect of his misery, and there is no anger, only a desperate need for confirmation. Is it the chosen one? He's asking if the boy, the hope, is the one from the prophecy, the one who will balance the Force. In his final seconds, his mind is on the cosmic scale, on the end of the Sith. Kenobi confirms it. He is. Maul's last words are, "He will avenge us." Us. That single word is the key to his entire redemption. He no longer sees Kenobi as just his enemy. He includes him. They are both victims of Sidious's grand design, the Jedi and the Sith, the light and the dark, both broken by the same evil. They are two old soldiers from a forgotten war, and the avenging isn't for Maul alone. It's for Qui-Gon, for Satine, for Savage, for the entire galaxy that was torn apart. He dies with the clarity that his life, and Kenobi's, were part of a larger story that is finally moving towards a just conclusion. Kenobi holds him as he dies. There is no triumph in his face, only a profound, weary sadness. He is mourning the man Maul could have been, and the tragedy of what he became. Maul's journey in Rebels is the story of a ghost trying to become a man again, and only succeeding in the moment of his death. He tried on the roles of mentor, prophet, and ally, but they were all just costumes. In the end, by stripping everything away, his empire, his apprentices, his rage, he found his true self. Not a Sith Lord, but a lost soul who finally saw the light and in seeing it was able to let go. His tragedy was that he understood everything too late to live, but his victory was that he understood it at all. You ever get that feeling where you finish watching something and your brain goes, wait, what if he didn't actually die? That's exactly what Star Wars fans felt after The Phantom Menace. Darth Maul gets sliced in half, falls down a reactor shaft, and somehow still feels like he's not done. It's wild, right? The guy barely said a dozen lines, but he left such a mark that people refused to believe he was gone for good. Before Disney reset the Star Wars canon, the Legends continuity, all those comics, novels and games from before 2014 went absolutely nuts exploring that what if. And trust me, Legends Maul is like a whole different creature. Meaner, darker, and somehow even more unhinged than the version we got in Clone Wars. The stuff they came up with for him honestly feels like a fever dream, written by someone who both loves and fears the guy. So let's rewind to how that even started. Back in 2000, just after The Phantom Menace, nobody really knew what to do with Maul. He was dead, or at least supposed to be, but the comics were like, nah, we can work with that. The first big Legends story to bring him back was Star Wars, Darth Maul, Resurrection. Basically, some crazy Sith cult on a backwater planet tries to clone or resurrect him using dark rituals. They actually succeed for about 5 minutes. Maul gets summoned, all red and pissed off, and then immediately starts slaughtering everyone who brought him back. You call him for help, he calls you a corpse. But before he can do much else, the ritual falls apart and poof, he's gone again. The story was short, but it set the tone for what Maul would become in Legends. this unstoppable force that refuses to stay dead. Then came the Visionaries comic anthology in 2005, and this is where things start getting really wild. There's a short story called Old Wounds that changed everything. In that one, Maul comes back years after the Phantom Menace, alive somehow, patched together with metal legs like some nightmare version of General Grievous. He's been tracking Obi-Wan Kenobi across the galaxy, just seething with rage. He finally finds him on Tatooine, hiding out and protecting a young Luke Skywalker. Maul marches into Obi-Wan's life like a ghost that refuses to move on. The two fight, and it's brutal. Maul is obsessed, Obi-Wan is older and tired, and they both know it can only end one way. At the end of that fight, Obi-Wan kills Maul, again, right there in the desert. But the image of Maul, standing in the twin suns with those mechanical legs burned into everyone's brain. Fans loved it so much that when the Clone Wars brought him back years later in the actual canon, they basically lifted that exact idea. Dave Filoni, he even said Old Wounds was his inspiration. So yeah, the Maul we know from the show, born straight out of that comic. But Legends didn't stop there. They went even deeper into the idea of Maul as this vengeful spirit of the Sith. There's this one short story, Darth Maul, Shadowhunter, that takes place before the Phantom Menace, and it really digs into his mindset. You see him working as Sidious's personal assassin, sneaking through Coruscant's underworld like a ghost. He's tracking down a guy who figured out the Sith are back, and he takes him out without hesitation. What's interesting is how the book gets into Maul's head. He's not just killing because he enjoys it, though he kinda does, but because he genuinely believes it's his purpose. He sees himself as a weapon, nothing more. That gives the whole thing this tragic edge. Then there's The Wrath of Darth Maul, which is a full-on origin story that came out in 2012, right before the Disney era ended the old timeline. This one dives into his childhood, his training under Sidious, and even his early missions. It paints him as a kid born into darkness. Sidious takes him from Dathomir, raises him in secret, and molds him into the perfect weapon. You get a glimpse of how cruel that training was. Constant pain, isolation, mental manipulation. Sidious basically turns him into a human blade. It's disturbing, but it makes you understand why Maul ended up the way he did. What's cool is that Wrath of Darth Maul actually lines up really well with what Clone Wars later showed. You see Mother Talzin, Dathomir, the Nightsisters, all of that stuff existed in early Legends. So even though Disney wiped the slate clean, a lot of those details snuck their way back into canon later. It's like Maul himself refused to be erased. Now, one of the weirdest Legends stories comes from the Star Wars Tales comics. There's this one issue, totally non-canon even within Legends, where Maul actually survives for decades and faces Luke Skywalker as an adult. I'm not even joking. He's older, bitter, and still rocking those mechanical legs. He tracks Luke down, thinking he's another Jedi he can kill to prove himself. But Luke being Luke, he doesn't even need to fight. He just kinda lets Maul's obsession burn out. The guy's entire identity was built around revenge, and without Kenobi around, there's nothing left. It's kind of poetic in a twisted way. Speaking of weird, you also had this Infinities line, like alternate universe versions of the movies. In one of them, Qui-Gon survives Naboo, trains Anakin differently, and Maul ends up escaping. He becomes this recurring threat across the galaxy, almost like a Sith bounty hunter. It's totally bonkers, but it shows how much people loved the idea of Maul sticking around. He became this what-if machine. What if he fought Vader? What if he turned on Sidious? What if he lived long enough to see Luke? Fans and writers just kept imagining new ways to keep him alive because he was too cool to kill. Then there's a gem that most people overlook, Darth Maul, Death Sentence. It came out around the time Clone Wars was airing, but was technically still under the Legends banner. In that one, Maul and Savage Opress are on the run after being defeated by Sidious. They end up taking over a mining planet and turning it into their personal fortress. It's like Mad Max meets Star Wars. You get to see Maul not as a puppet or a student, but as his own warlord. He's building an empire from scratch, commanding armies, planning revenge. It's not canon anymore, but man, it fits perfectly with who he became in the show. What's funny is how all these different versions of Maul, the resurrected monster, the vengeful ghost, the calculating warlord, somehow all feel true to who he is. The core of Maul never changes. He's pure willpower. You can chop him in half, blow him up, erase him from the timeline, and he'll still crawl back, glaring at the universe like it owes him something. If you ever read the Visionaries comic I mentioned earlier, there's this panel that really sums it up. After Obi-Wan kills Maul for the second time, the comic ends with a quiet shot of Luke playing outside the hut, completely unaware of the chaos that just happened nearby. It's such a haunting image. Maul died trying to end Obi-Wan's legacy, and instead, he literally died at the doorstep of the future he was trying to destroy. That's storytelling gold, man. And that's the beauty of the Legends timeline. It wasn't afraid to get weird or emotional. Some stories were totally over the top, others were surprisingly deep. They didn't all fit together neatly, but they all explored a side of Maul that the movies never had time for. He wasn't just Sidious's apprentice, or the guy who killed Qui-Gon. He was this embodiment of pure survival. Like the galaxy kept trying to erase him, and he kept saying, "Not today." Even in the old Star Wars Insider magazines, there were bits and pieces of lore about him, his favourite weapons, his training regimen, even his personal philosophy. He saw combat as meditation. Every duel, every strike was him proving his existence. There's something almost monk-like about that, except, if monks also decapitated people. The craziest part is how much of that Legends material ended up sneaking back into canon. The mechanical legs, the Nightsisters, his rivalry with Kenobi, his connection to Ezra, even his death in the desert, all of that has its roots in the Legends stories. It's like the writers couldn't let go of the old Maul either. They kept finding ways to bring him home. And honestly, I think that's why people still talk about him today. Every time you think his story's done, another piece of it surfaces somewhere, and it somehow fits. He's the ultimate what-if of Star Wars. What if the apprentice never stopped fighting? What if revenge was all you had left? What if hate was the only thing keeping you alive? Legends took those questions and ran with them. They turned Maul into this tragic figure, not because he lost, but because he never learned how to stop fighting. There's something very human in that, weirdly enough. We all know what it's like to hold on to something too long, to chase a goal so hard that you forget why you started. Maul's just that feeling turned into a red and black demon with a double lightsaber. And the best part, even though those stories aren't canon anymore, they still matter. The old stories inspire the new ones. Maul might not exist in the Legends sense anymore, but his spirit absolutely does. You can see it in every new villain that follows, that mix of rage, discipline, and tragedy. So yeah, the Legends Maul, he's the ghost that refuses to die. In fiction and in fandom, he crawled out of a pit, out of canon, and into our collective imagination, and somehow that feels like the most fitting ending he could ever get. George Lucas's initial concept for Maul was, in his own words, to create the ultimate Sith warrior. He was inspired by the idea of a monk gone bad, a creature of pure evil who was more a force of nature than a man. The design, by the legendary artist Ian McCaig, is a masterpiece of less is more. The black and red, the tribal tattoos, the horns. It was simple, iconic, and instantly recognizable from a silhouette alone. He looked like a nightmare from an ancient myth. But the design was only half the equation. The other half was a young martial artist named Ray Park. Park was a force of nature. He brought a physicality to the role that was absolutely unprecedented in Star Wars. Before Maul, lightsaber fights, while iconic, had a certain theatrical, almost elegant weight to them. Think Vader versus Obi-Wan in A New Hope. But Park, with his background in wushu and gymnastics, made the lightsaber an extension of his own body. The way he moved was fluid, acrobatic, and brutally efficient. He didn't just swing a laser sword, he performed a deadly ballet. Culturally, Maul impacted Star Wars in a lot of ways. First, he proved you didn't need a ton of lines or a big ego to leave a mark. You could create a character whose presence alone was enough. He influenced later villains, not only in Star Wars, but across pop culture. You see echoes of Maul in characters who are visually striking, silent but deadly, and morally complex. It's like he created a template for the dark, tragic, and absolutely lethal villain. Then there's his double-bladed lightsaber. When it spun around that first time in The Phantom Menace, people lost their minds. The choreography, the design, the sheer novelty, it became a visual signature. Maul's saber is now iconic, instantly recognizable, and it even changed how fight scenes were done in sci-fi. You see traces of it in games, comics, and even other films. People still try to replicate that wow factor that Maul brought to dueling. On the fan side, Maul inspired an entire generation. Cosplayers, artists, fan fiction writers, comic book creators, they all latched onto him. And interestingly, many fans gravitated to his tragic story rather than his villainy alone. There's something compelling about a character who's got raw power but is also broken inside. That complexity makes Maul stick in people's minds more than a purely evil character ever could. His legacy also extends to storytelling itself. Because of Maul, Star Wars started exploring villains differently. They realized, hey, maybe the bad guys have layers too. Maybe their backstory and trauma can be just as engaging as the heroes. Maul opened the door for characters like Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and even Kylo Ren decades later. He's the benchmark for dark apprentices with depth. And let's be honest, part of his cultural impact is just how visually unforgettable he is. The image of him spinning through the air with that saber, the hooded shadow of Sidious behind him, the yellow eyes gleaming, that stuff sticks. It's memeable, posterable, Instagrammable. Maul is Star Wars marketing gold. But beyond that, he's also a reminder that design, storytelling, and performance can make a character resonate without hours of screen time. Finally, the bittersweet part. Maul's legacy is tragic because even at his peak, as a warlord, as a revenge-seeking force of nature, he never really wins. He gets scraps of power, moments of victory, but there's always loss, betrayal, or defeat around the corner. That's part of what makes his story feel real. Life, even for a Sith, is messy, unfair, and occasionally poetic. And because of that, his story continues to influence writers, filmmakers, and fans. He's not just a character, he's a symbol of struggle, obsession, and surviving in a galaxy that doesn't care if you live or die. So when people talk about Darth Maul today, they aren't just talking about a scary Sith with a flashy weapon. They're talking about a character who proved that presence, design, and a little mystery can make you unforgettable. They're talking about a villain who made the audience care, even when he was at his worst. And they're talking about a legacy that will outlive most of the other characters because he's terrifying, tragic, and somehow human. And that's the real magic of Darth Maul. He's a warning, a lesson, and a story we keep coming back to because he feels alive. He's more than a Sith apprentice. He's an icon. He's the guy who fell down a shaft, came back from the dead, and made the galaxy remember him forever. And honestly, if you're a Star Wars fan, you can't help but respect that hustle.